Good evening, and welcome to Having a Drink with Mink. As always, I'm your host, Jason Mink. It's an early spring evening here on planet Earth. The grass is chirping, and the smell of freshly cut birds fills the evening air. I hope you have a nice beverage on hand. I know that I do. Sooner or later, everyone gets an action figure. Einstein got one. Elvis had several, and even Golden Girl B. Arthur received the plastic treatment. Although, perhaps the less said about that, the better. Tonight, it's the chairman of the board, no less than Frankie Sinatra. Now, I'm not the biggest Sinatra fan. Sure, I know all the words to Mr. Success, but hey, who doesn't? That said, this figure really hooked me. Released by Mattel in the year 2000, this 12-inch offering is a real firecracker. His suit is better tailored than any of my nice clothes, and in conjunction with a surprising amount of articulation, this allows Frank to get into lots of action poses. He comes with a snappy chapeau, a microphone, and even some cuckoo sheet music for wooing the chippies. Now all we need is a Dino and a Sammy to go with him, and Vegas is ours, baby. Speaking of music, turns out records are back. Of course, so's inflation and existential dread, so I passed on this copy of the East Side Connection's You're So Right For Me. It's a glorious platter of splatter vinyl and a promo copy to boot. Splatter is popular, but this vintage disc is a much nicer example of the concept than anything I've seen lately. Not to be a cynic, but if I want to listen to the song, I can find it on the internet. I'd buy this and hang it on my wall. As a kid, I didn't really understand the appeal of Charlie's Angels. I mean, I understood the appeal, but I figured there had to be something more to it than that. There wasn't. But they did get a van. In the 1970s, everyone had a van. I think they were government mandated. Now this is what's called a label slap, in that Ertl simply painted pink, a pre-existing van mold, and slapped the show's logo on it. Such practices were common then, even if the end result was a bit puzzling. Seems like it'd be hard to sneak up on the bad guys in one of these, but hey, I don't run a world-class detective agency, so what do I know? Speaking of 1970s trends, and you're going to need some flair for your jean jacket, and I have just the thing. Featuring Marvel's Hulk at the height of his televisual popularity, these bright and colorful fabric patches from the 1970s will look killer next to your Kiss and Heinz pickle pins. Featuring an action shot, a logo, and a close-up of old Greenskin, these patches are the iron-on kind, so once Mom puts them on, they're not coming off. Choose wisely. To my knowledge, there never was a MASH van, but there was a toy helicopter. Why is another issue entirely. I mean, sure, I remember those iconic opening moments of the show, but MASH wasn't really something watched by kids, and yet it still had its own action figure line. Baffling, I know, but it was a way of selling military toys without the negative stigma attached to such things at the time. I mean, the chopper came with Alan freaking Alda. This guy couldn't step on a bug without breaking his ankle, so he was the perfect choice for this non-confrontational aircraft. Not sure who's supposed to fly the thing, as Hawkeye is a doctor and not a pilot, but hey, no need to dissect the gossamer. Following on with this week's 4-color selections, and if old guys like old comics, then these should be a treat. We begin with the Beverly Hillbillies. Oh sure, but not just any issue. As you can see, Granny is being abducted by this honest-to-Gorshin robot, and the previous owner provided some supplemental dialogue.
No, if you want her, you're going to have to catch me.
Wild, huh? For all we know, this belonged to a young Frank Miller. Sure, I can see his aesthetic being shaped by the clamp at first. On the back, and it's a message from our friends at Daisy Air Rifles. Now, rainy days can be fun days. How so? Billy is stuck inside with nothing to do, but Bill's dad has a big idea. And how? Wow, he's cradling that rifle like it's the love of his life. I tell him to get a room, but they're already in one. And Bill's mom asks the sensible question, not why did I marry this gun nut sensible, but where will he shoot? Why, where else but in the family room? So what if Uncle Paul is sleeping in there? It's raining and Dad has a hankering for gunplay. And sure, the first thing you want to do when you hand over a loaded daisy is shout surprise. What's a few more holes in the wall? And why is Dad the one playing with the damn thing? I thought this was all to assuage Billy's precipitory ennui. And you gotta feel bad for the wife. Face it, honey, this replaces intimacy in our marriage. As if having Uncle Paul in the other room already hadn't. Inside, Granny is whipping up some victuals for Jethro in the kitchen. After all, he's a growing boy of 32. Hey, some birds hang around the nest a little longer than others. Ellie, reading the classifieds, spies this ad. Looks like someone's looking to board their boy while they go on a business trip, and Jed reckons they got enough room for a lodger. Only instead of your standard issue Chip Douglas type, a ding-dang robot shows up on their doorstep. The professor pleads that the Clampetts not turn Rufus away. After all, no one else is willing to put up with his abomination, and even mechanical men get lonely. Maybe a little too lonely, as we soon discover. As if his roving claw wasn't bad enough, Rufus tries to take Jed to the mat. That's one amorous automaton. Its advances spurned, the metal feller shimmies up a telephone pole, getting a big jolt of juice for his trouble. It lands in the Clampett cement pond, promptly shorting out. Jed's afeard the professor's got one dead robot on his hands, but on the bright side, Skynet's been averted, so maybe not all that bad. For all that, the clan does what it can to revive their gear-driven guest. And while oil doesn't work, what about something a titch more powerful? Specifically a swat of Granny's moonshine. This gets Rufus not only back on his feet, but airborne to boot. Where's Mr. Drysdale when you need him? Next up, let's take a trip into the unknown. No need to pack, as this journey is strictly one way. 2 vials for Vidalia concerns Hugo Blob, a young misanthrope in the making. Seems his unsightly appearance hasn't earned him many pals. He can't even get into the Royal Boppers Club. Unaccepted by the ONS, Blob applies himself, eventually becoming an astronaut, of all things. On an alien planet, he witnesses the use of a serum which can alter an individual's appearance, and after an efficient murder, he takes the miraculous substance for himself. Already plotting, Blob returns to Earth, assuming the guise of the latest person to wrong him. After getting his revenge, Blob decides to have a little fun, assuming various guises and living vicariously through the vials. He gets drunk at a nightclub and decides he likes the girl on stage, attempting to assume the identity of a handsome Hollywood star to woo her. However, his double vision ends up leading to a transformation into a double of Bosco, the performing monkey, instead. Well, why not? I mean, all stories need to end somewhere, and that poo ain't gonna fling itself. In the same issue, Nemesis takes on no less than Hitler. Or maybe they're just dancing. I've never understood courting rituals. In the end, Hitler was the ideal comic book villain. Everyone knew who he was. No company owned the copyright, and his appearance made even the lamest characters seem heroic by comparison. To wit. So I'm not sure what's going on with the serial pantlessness of these ACG characters. Perhaps they were attempting to emulate Robin? Or maybe the editor just had a thing for coltish, smooth-legged young men. Really, it's anyone's guess. And this guy is clearly the villain. How can you tell? Well, he's smoking. A lot. Like in every panel. Here, and here again, without his jacket, and then 3 more times before the story's end. These are all obviously the same image. I'm not sure if there was a problem with the art and this was done to fix it, but it's unpleasant enough to look at once, let alone 5 times. Also, now I need a cigarette, and I don't even smoke. American Comics Group was an odd outfit for sure. Their sense of whimsy and playfulness was certainly at odds with the then successful Marvel formula of action and melodrama, and maybe there's something to that. Not taking yourself so seriously can be pretty liberating, especially if the goal is to entertain. I mean, I'm wearing an arrow through the head as we speak, and I'm not even on camera. Next up, a Nemesis encounters the Ghost Who Lived. Seems pretty above board, but then we flip it open and off come the pants. And Margaret showed less leg. And speaking of body parts, here's an odd panel featuring a herd of disembodied hands. Shades of Fletcher Hanks. And there's something for all you 60s era monster fans. The same set of X-ray specs comics have been selling for years, only jazzed up by some creepy artwork. Just take the brown acid and people look like this for hours. Glasses or not. Then hold on to your hats and have your tickets ready as we head into taboo territory. And check out these odd-looking little fellows. Presumably a fearsome technological vanguard, even if they do look like Art Deco watering cans. And behold their awe-inspiring weaponry, which provides our sound effect of the week. Don't scoff. Coming up with a good one is difficult, if the next panel is any indication. At least we were spared the use of exclamation points. At any rate, in spite of their seeming military prowess, these tin soldiers are eventually taken down, providing us with this Twilight Zone-esque reveal. As Bart Simpson once sagely stated, the ironing is delicious. Our final ACG comic, and it's a doozy. It concerns Henry W. Jones, the most ordinary man on Earth, and though he seems fairly unassuming, there's more here than meets the eye. An eclipse is precursor to an oncoming cosmic danger as a fleet of alien ships pass in front of our sun, intent on subjugating the planet, with mankind powerless to intervene. Or is it? Jones, unmoving, vanishes from his position on the podium, reappearing in the icy depths of outer space. Without so much as a spacesuit, he advances on the alien aggressor, transforming into a towering titan of living flame and swatting aside the column of invading ships like flies. It's the quiet ones that you always need to watch out for. Next up, a little something from a battered issue of Pep that I rescued. The eyes have it sees Mr. Weatherby confounded by the latest fad. Nutty eyebrows. Only it's not just B and V under their sway, it seems everyone is doing it, including my girl Midge. The bee seeks out a colleague, but even Miss Grundy has been roped in. And that's actually not a bad look for her, all things considered. Desperate, our agitated administrator turns to Jughead, who manages not only to stop the trend dead in its tracks, but creates an entirely new one in its place. I don't know what they pay school principals, but I can't imagine it covers what must be very expensive therapy. Archie and Friends spawned a load of imitators over the years, but Tower's teen humor titles actually utilized MLG creators to craft their stories. Sam Schwartz and Doug Crane contributed to this issue of Go-Go and Animal, which sees Go-Go fixated on a new fella. And while at first this seems like a good thing to her folks, it quickly becomes clear that it's not quite that cut and dried. In spite of his brainy nature, Egghead lacks the social graces necessary for getting in good with the rents. He's pedantic, obtuse, and downright insulting, although Go-Go thinks he's the bee's knees. And while in the end things don't work out for this mismatched couple, Go-Go isn't about to let a little thing like that stand in the way of her social life. What a kook. And here's your Tippy Teen Fan Club membership card. I'm not sure what the perks are, as any time I try and use mine, the authorities are called. Go figure. These Tower Teen titles had a lot more contemporary musical content than the Archie books, focusing on the big and not so big bands at the time. On the inside of this brilliant cover, we get the promo shot of Frank Zappa and the Mothers. You wouldn't see Betty mooning over these weirdos, although Veronica might play them to irritate her dad. In Twerpsichore, we discover that Animal isn't much of a dancer. Go figure. Seeing as how this was the 60s, you pretty much had to know how to pony if you expected to be taken seriously, so Go-Go signs him up for some dancing lessons. Only instead of being assigned a crusty old instructor, Animal is given this hot little number. Miss Farnham takes Animal in to show him how to tango, leaving Go-Go to stress about the potential romantic entanglement unspooling inside. Her imagination getting the best of her, she bursts through the door, only to discover this nightmare scenario. In the end, she decides that Animal is fine just the way he is, even if he has developed a strange and powerful attraction to CPR dummies. Here's a Nancy strip from a shredded issue of Tip Top Comics where our title character decides to try on a pair of forgotten eyeglasses. This works because we can all remember doing the same thing as kids, although creator Ernie Bushmiller ends the proceedings with a great gag. Another interesting feature of Tip Top were these page fillers, focusing on popular personalities of the day. Boy, people just don't talk about Abner Biberman anymore. And if you thought ad placement in modern media was bad, well, it's been going on forever. If Pepsi, the Pepsi-Cola cop, is any indication, I can't stand this guy, mostly because he busted me for drinking RC. What can I say? It's just a better mixer. I'm not a Disney guy, but I did get a kick out of this Donald Duck strip, where our feathered pal learns the hard way why friends and girlfriends don't mix. There are a few sights sadder in life than a cuckolded duck. This issue of Sensation Comics is a good barometer of just how much Wonder Woman strips have changed over the years. For a start, we never see Etta Candy anymore, which is a real missed opportunity. This concerns funny business at an American factory during World War II, but Diana takes the time to drop by the slums and teach this bully what for. It's not polite to punch ladies in the face, son, even if they have a jaw like a battleship. But that's just the start of the madness on display, as we head home with the bully to discover where he learns such sterling manners from. And we walk in on this horror show. There's really nothing funny about domestic abuse, but it is a tad surreal seeing these situations depicted in this art style. Later, back at the factory, all of Etta's gals have succumbed to war-laugh mania, and work grinds to a hilarious halt. After that, Diana finds herself abducted. I don't know, Glub, Well, that makes two of us, sister. There's also a fairly nutball Wildcat story in the back. And once again, that art. I'm not being critical here, it's just unsettling, like a Tijuana Bible's about to break out. It's a far cry from today's AI-generated computer-colored eye diabetes with some lovely ultraviolence to keep the ball rolling, so to speak. And you don't need the luck of the Irish. All you need is 4 dimes, and you'll be rolling in the comics clover. Because I'm a glutton for punishment, I also picked up this issue of Captain Marvel presents The Terrible Five. Much is made of this knockoff character thanks to his name and distasteful power set. Watch this, Billy! Cut to Billy throwing up in a corner. For all that, less attention is paid to the good captain's knockoff rogues gallery. The most original of the 5 is Atom Jaw. An atomic experiment during the Second World War disfigures a top scientist. To fix him, a new jaw is made out of atomic-proof material X4, which is odd. The explosion already happened, and it's unlikely this guy is dying to go back to work with radiation anytime soon, so why he needs this is anybody's guess. And it turns out the scientists have inadvertently created a modern Frankenstein. You gave him metal cartoon shark teeth. What the hell did you think was going to happen? Preston's reaction is to start biting everything in sight. As he still has a normal throat and bowels, I'm guessing he spits, not swallows. And this one has Myron Fass written all over it. It's nonsensical, in poor taste, and leaves you feeling queasy after reading it. Socko indeed. We finish up with one of my personal favorite old comics, IW's Dream of Love number 8. We've been talking a lot about IW lately, so I figured it'd be a good time to revisit this classic. Meet John Juan. A variation on the lover archetype, John Juan was written by no less than Superman co-creator Jerry Siegel, with art by Alex Schonberg. Cleopatra loved him, Salome adored him, Lucretia Borgia was wild about him. So how has this eternal horn dog survived all this time? Turns out John was driven out of Atlantis because all the local ladies loved him too much. He's chased up an iceberg as he ponders this unfair fate. Can he help it if the lovelorn women cast glances in his direction? Pant. Can he be blamed if his nimble tongue sought out the proper words to solace thwarted femininity? Before he can use that nimble tongue on anyone else, John gets bopped on the bean by a discus and he drops into the icy waters below. And while there would be much weeping from the women, this was just the way it had to be. Only instead of drowning, John is frozen in a block of ice containing a rare seaweed, which puts him in a Captain America-style coma. Atlantis is consumed, but John floats on, eventually thawing out on Love Beach. He's set upon by savages and taken into the village, presumably to a dire fate, but salvation is afoot, or at least a toe. He's left alone with young Ooga Maru, and you just know where this is going. All Ooga wants is to clean her fish, but she's beguiled when John gives her smile number 3. It's the one he reserves for emergencies. As it never fails, the young girl falls for John. She explains how Atlantis sank into the ocean and how John is about to be sacrificed by the local witch doctor so their island may avoid the same fate. Ooga slips him a stone knife, and John frees himself. Liberated, he invents the one-liner before slaying the witch doctor and getting away. After all, there's an entire world of nubile flesh just waiting to be plundered by this smooth-talking cheeseball. It's snarky, irreverent fun from a time when such things were a given. I mean, what else were you buying comics for? That's all we have for you today. Thanks for sticking with us. If you enjoyed this episode, please give it a like, comment, and if you haven't already, subscribe. I'm Jason Mink, and I'll see you in the funny papers.